Welcome to the third annual Grant High School Story Slam. So glad it is the third. Can you believe it? I know your whole career at Grant. So my name's Paige Battle. I'm the librarian here at Grant, and I'm going to be your MC tonight. So I'm going to go over some of the rules if you aren't familiar with them, and just as reminders to my storytellers. So each story you're going to hear tonight is the storyteller's own construction. Copyright laws apply to literary works, so you're not going to tell those. The audience and judges are expecting real-life adventures, and I've gotten to hear these stories, and they are real-life adventures and a lot of fun. If we discover that you have pirated someone's story in whole or in part, you will be disqualified from all competition and prizes in this school year, but that's not going to happen. Remember, you get 5 minutes to tell your story, plus a 1-minute grace period. If you go over the 6-minute limit, 1 full point will be deducted from your total score. This is pretty harsh, much harsher than the ice skating rules that are happening this year. So there's no props when you tell your story, no costumes, no musical instruments, and those are the main rules to remember, okay? So I told the storytellers that I would share a story, and as a way, it's going to help our judges get used to assigning a point value. So first, I'm going to introduce you to the judges who are here tonight. So in the first spot over there, we have Madeline Kokas. She's our college career coordinator here at Grant. I'm very grateful she could be here tonight because at 2:43 this afternoon, I got notice that one of my judges was not going to be able to make it, and I ran in a panic to ask Madeline if she would sit in, and she said yes. Next to her is Nia Weisberg. She is a returning judge to our table, and we're very grateful that she could be here tonight, running from, were you over at your other job when you're not being a judge at Pacific University? So she came all the way from Forest Grove. Thank you. Next to Nia is Kim Bissell. Am I pronouncing that right? Bissell. Support her at Broadway Books. She is one of the co-owners there. So thank you for being here, Kim. Then we have Shelley Buchanan sitting next to Kim. I've known Shelley almost my whole librarian life. She's a mentor to me, and currently she teaches in the San Jose State University School of Information program. Thank you for being here. And then a familiar face at the end of the table is Pardis Navi, retired math teacher from Grant High School. So unlike the director category at this year's Golden Globe Awards, we have an all-female panel of judges. So thank you, ladies. And also a huge thank you to Paul Sochiwa, who will be our timekeeper tonight. That magical sound is what you will hear if you talk for more than 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to sacrifice myself by telling a story. Let's see if I can get it done in 5 minutes or less, and then we'll get started with the story slam. So the theme for tonight is trouble, and as I was trying to gather student interest in this program, I went around to a lot of the classes and told students what the theme was and gave them an idea of, there's times when you could be in bad trouble, and so I told a story about one of the worst April Fool's days of my life. Some of y'all heard that. Then I talked about things that could be troubling to you, and I told a story about how one time when I was in a chapel service at my high school, we were asked to announce rock and roll music and how that really shook me to my core. But I never really told a story about getting into good trouble or necessary trouble, so that's what I thought I would do tonight. And it reminded me of the time last year, it was January, the inauguration was happening. Yes, heavy sigh. And I was in Atlanta for an American Library Association midwinter conference. I was there because I was representing the state of Oregon for the American Association of School Libraries affiliate assembly. So each conference, there's one at midwinter, there's one at annual, which usually happens in June. The AASL has these affiliate assemblies, and they do really great work. They are always advocating for school libraries and teacher librarians. The problem is they always schedule these affiliate assemblies at the most inopportune times. So it always happens that they're having their first meeting when the exhibits are opening for the first time and they're giving away all the really cool swag, and you have the keynote speakers that are there, and you're sitting in an affiliate assembly meeting talking about concerns and commendations for your area of the country. Good work, but not where I always really want to be. And last January, where I really wanted to be was out in the street, because there was a march that was taking place. Two organizations had come together to march for social justice and women's rights. So they were associated with a lot of the women's marches that were happening last January. And my husband, son, and daughter back in Portland were all revved up to go march on that Saturday while I sat in an affiliate assembly meeting. The other thing that really stung was once I got to Atlanta, word had gotten out that Congressman John Lewis was not going to be going to the inauguration. He was going to be in Atlanta with his constituents leading the March for Social Justice and Women's Rights. And I sat in this affiliate assembly meeting, and I told myself, I know this is where I'm supposed to be, but I don't care if I get in trouble. I think I need to leave and go be a part of this march. So I tiptoed out of the meeting. I texted my roommate and said, I'm making a break for it. I'm going to be down in the hotel lobby, and if you want to come join me, get down here in 5 minutes. So she joined me. We ran outside. We could hear drums beating. We could see police cars and police motorcycles kind of swarming around. We knew the general vicinity of where this march was going to take place. So we just kept moving towards this sound. And right as we rounded the corner, here came the front of the march, and leading it was Congressman John Lewis. And because we had waited till the last minute, we were able to slip in behind the front row and be right behind him as he started this march off. So, as he would say, there are times when you need to get into some good and necessary trouble. And I thought, if that's what's going to happen, I'm here for it. And in conclusion, the thing that was really lovely was 2 days later, he was awarded several youth media awards, the Prince Award, the Coretta Scott King Award, and he was signing books afterwards, and I got to go up to him and tell him thank you for the inspiration that you provide, that he was giving an example to my own children to march, that I had gotten to march with him the day before. And when he heard I was from Portland, he said, I really love the bookstore there. I do too. And it could be Broadway books or Powell's. There you go. That was a time when I decided I was going to get into some good trouble. The student storytellers tonight, though, have some varied stories about the trouble that they have seen. And we are going to hear first from Danny Fisher.
I'm really sorry, Miss Battle. I thought they were gonna give her a score.
Oh.
Yeah, you said get used to scoring. I would be curious.
But they're going to announce it.
Oh, they're not?
No.
Oh, so it's not like Poetry Slam where they like hold up a sign.
No.
Okay, that's safer.
That is safer.
There are lots of kinds of trouble. Many great storytellers today will talk of trouble with their parents or trouble at school. And believe me, I've been there. You get mad and you mouth off to your teacher, and then you go home and your mom gives you that look and you just sort of shit yourself. I've been there. I've done that. But I am here today to talk about a different type of trouble, which is physical trouble, where your reflexes are on high alert and your adrenaline-pumped brain is not sure if it will still be functioning in 10 seconds. I am a skateboarder. I know, I look the type, backwards hat, flipping off senior citizens, competing in literary competitions. And I love to bomb hills, which is rad skater slang for riding downhill on your skateboard. And its name should give you an idea of how safe it is. And usually I go down relatively mellow hills, just a nice, smooth ride to the bottom, relaxing almost. And I say most of the time, because while I am overall a very smart and cautious-minded child, I am a 16-year-old male. I have a brain full of testosterone and a terribly underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, so sometimes I make bad decisions. So that is where my story begins, really, standing at the top of a hill on the corner of Wisteria and Cesare Chavez, which is so steep that the houses have a 3-foot platform that are built into them on one side so that all of their furniture doesn't go sliding out of the windows and down the street. And so steep, in fact, that many cyclists I know are afraid to go down it, even though bicycles have brakes. Halfway down this hill, I realized that skateboards did not have brakes. Now, upon realizing that my skateboard did not, in fact, have any type of braking mechanism, I would have loved to jump off, bail out. Because there are very few things that are scarier than riding a 30 by 8-inch piece of plywood down a steep hill with nothing but a half-centimeter thick piece of protection around my head. However, there is a moment called the point of no return. Skaters call it the oh shit moment, and that is when you realize that you are skating at a speed faster than you can physically move your legs, meaning that you cannot just jump off because you're not going to be able to outrun the momentum that you carry. My legs can move at approximately 20 miles per hour for a hilariously short distance, and I was currently traveling at somewhere around 30, so I rode with it. Now, in the spirit of today's theme, I will say that this is when I realized that I might be in a teensy bit of trouble. Now, if this were a fictional story, I would tell you all about how I rode to the bottom of the hill effortlessly and triumphantly conquered it at high speeds. However, this is a true story, and so I will instead tell you that about 3/4 of the way down the hill, my board started to wobble, and then it slipped out from under me, and then I took one step forward, and then another step forward, and I did not step a third time because I flew shoulder first into the ground. Fun times. I walked away with a bleeding shoulder, a bruised elbow, a scraped knee, and a completely shattered ego. But it was a beautiful thing. While this is a bit of a cliche, it could not be more true that falling down, failing, and getting into trouble all make you better. I still go down hills whenever I get the chance. I fall and I learn. I walked away from that hill, and it still scares me. Eventually, I will go back to that hill. Whether it is from my friends giving me a dare on a boring day, or when I manage to find a more well-built skateboard, I will eventually go back. And I will still probably fall. I will still be in trouble. But that is good trouble, necessary trouble, because no one ever became great without getting into a little bit of trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. I'll have to say, I feel your pain regularly when I go to Oaks Park and attempt to relive my glory days of roller skating. So I know what you're going through.
Are you gonna read the bios?
For each of you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll tell you about Danny in the program that he's a sophomore who's in the Grant Percussion Ensemble, and he thinks everybody should forecast for that next year. I'll have to say it was quite fun when the drum line came through the library for curriculum day, and I got to learn how to play the drums. And his hobbies, you might not believe this, include skateboarding down steep hills until he hurts himself. So hopefully that will change. Judges, do we need more time? Just a little bit of time. Okay. This is a new format we're following. In April, we will be having our poetry slam, And if you come back for that, the way that we do the judging there is the judges have to make a very quick judgment of the poetry they hear and hold up a score, much like the NBA Slam Dunk contest, if anyone was watching that this past weekend. So now we're ready to go. Okay. All right, our second storyteller is Elaine Earl, and I'll tell you that Elaine is a junior who's questioning many things she thought she knew about reality and society. I think that's a lot of us right now, Elaine. But she's trying to remain optimistic through use of avoidance behavior. Okay. Let's see, is that a comfortable height, or you want me to?
Yeah, this is fine. Many mumbling mice. All right. Awesome. The spring of my freshman year, I decided to run away. I suppose I was trying to make a statement. My family was never exactly what one might refer to as happy and functional, and with things escalating enough for DHS to get involved, I wanted to let my parents know that this roller coaster plunge down to rock bottom needed to level off a bit. I was also looking for an escape and a good old adventure. However, I like to think that I'm a smart person, and if I was going to run away, I would do it in a smart way. I knew that realistically I couldn't just waltz out of my house and find my own happy way to independence and adulthood. That was a recipe for disaster. So instead, I knew that I needed to run to someplace. And then my counselor presented me with a card for a homeless and runaway youth shelter, and I had found my destination. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I left my phone at home. I planned my route on the school computers. And as soon as school got out, I hopped on the 72 bus downtown. Within an hour, I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing. The bus let me off in Old Town, and the address where the shelter was supposed to be didn't look like a youth shelter. It looked more like an insurance agency. So I was this young girl without a phone in a kind of shady part of town, and every mildly disreputable looking person I crossed paths with just made my nerves go higher and higher. By the time one person had asked me for directions, 2 people had asked me for money, and 1 person had walked past me forcefully mumbling nonsense, I was kind of panicking, and it must have been evident because a nice man asked me if I needed help. He took the time out of his day to let me borrow his phone and call the shelter, who told me that I was at the right address on the wrong side of the river. So through a series of similarly wonderful strangers lending me their phones, I made it to the shelter. And while I was there, they gave me donuts and let me watch TV and told me that I needed parental consent to stay there. And so I had to call my mom. And everyone, please go home and hug your mothers tonight. Mothers are great. She understood why I would want to get out of the house, and she signed the papers to let me stay there a week. They took me to a safe house. I'll explain what a safe house generally is, aside from the obvious, a house that is safe. It is usually spacious, inconspicuous, but not completely out of the way, the kind of building you'll walk past a million times and never know it's anything other than an old building, unless, of course, you're tipped off by the vans full of children being ferried in and out. The rules there were strict. We had our phones taken away. We had to use a landline if we wanted to make calls. I know, a landline. Who uses those? But strangely enough, I was more willing to go along with rules set by strangers than the much more flexible ones of my parents. The people I met there, I met several interesting characters there, and I can't give any names because confidentiality, but I can tell you a little bit about them. There was this one guy who was well-versed in life skills and could easily touch the ceiling, and he helped the counselors cook every meal. I was the only girl in my dormitory who wasn't pregnant. One of them was very bitter, sadly, and she kept telling me that you don't ever trust a boy when he tells you he loves you because he is lying. The other girl was bright and exuberant, and she wore a fedora and craved chicken nuggets, and she said that her boyfriend had just proposed to her. So during my time there, I learned more about the people who had been there for seemingly forever, and I watched other kids come and go until it was my time to leave. I went back home, and nothing changed. It took a year or so for things to get better in my family, because that's life. My parents are divorced now. Mom is looking into selling the house. The dad has 2 kittens and plans to buy property in Milwaukee. And the moral of this story is not exactly clear, because it's not a neat little fairy tale. But what I did gain from this experience is being in a place with troubled teens. My own troubles seemed to pale in comparison. And this has taught me to listen to people's problems and to try and treat everyone with a little more empathy and kindness. And I would encourage all of you to do the same, because you can never guess about the troubles that other people are dealing with in their life. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. I told Elaine earlier today, when we were going over our dress rehearsal at lunch, that I thought the moral of her story was really needed for this past week, that we don't know what other people are experiencing. So thank you for sharing that story. Our judges are writing away. Anyone in the audience ever been in bad trouble? Oh, I see the teenagers raising their hands. They should come up here and share a story with us. No. Sing a song. Oh, you're fine.
Sing about Daniel.
Yeah.
No, you guys like doing those, so
We asked Danny, did he want to be Danny Fisher from Grease, or did he want to be Daniel Elton John? And he didn't know that reference. So Elaine and I had to sing some Elton John to him.
I thought it was
I think we
coming
have-
through the speaker somewhere. I'm like, that's Elton John.
That's
Daniel.
right.
That's not Elton John.
No. Okay. I think we're ready for our third storyteller. Jordan Demoff is a freshman who has been playing soccer for 8 years, but whose love for comics will always be stronger.
Who knew that a muffin would get me in the most trouble I would have gotten in my entire middle school career? It was a new school year, that means new supplies, new friends, all that. So with the new school supplies, I got a new stack of paper. And that stack of paper wasn't just going to be used for notes, it was going to be used for drawing. I had a distinct system I used. On one side of my desk, I'd have my work. On the other side, I'd have this paper that I'd draw on. Apparently, my teacher did not like my system, and I think she said the rules, but she either said it too quietly or didn't say them at all. She probably said them in her head, but she didn't like the system I was using. Eventually, it turned into her stealing each one of my pages that I would draw on each day. But then she got tired of having to constantly steal one page at a time, so she stole the entire thing, making me have to buy more paper, which is just an inconvenience because now I can't take notes, so how am I going to succeed in your class? One day, she was done with this. We were sitting in science and we were learning about kidneys. And a way we learned kidneys was kids' needs. And put together, it sounds like kidneys. And at the time, I was hungry, so kids needs muffins. I needed muffins. I was so hungry. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to draw a muffin on my hand so I can remember this science lecture. I draw a muffin and I hear my name called. Jordan, go out in the hall. I sit out in the hallway and I don't know what I've done. For all I know, I drew a muffin on my hand with a thin tip Sharpie. Later she comes out, she hands me a piece of paper and asks me to go fill it out in the office. I go to the office, and as I'm walking down the stairs, I look at the page. I didn't read anything else but the title. The title said, referral. Oh boy, I got a referral, but I don't really know what I did. All I did was draw a muffin. Sitting in the office, I started filling out all the questions they make you answer. What did you do wrong? I don't know what I did wrong. And on the side column, it was a place where the teacher was supposed to fill out what that student has done. On the top box, it said abuse to teacher, abuse to students, foul language, alcohol, drugs, but none of those were marked. The last one was marked. That one was other, where there was a line where you could write whatever you wanted. And she did write whatever she wanted, but she wrote it in cursive. 6th graders can't read cursive. It is one of the hardest handwritings to read. All I saw was being a nuisance to other students and being a nuisance with her drawing. I don't remember anyone saying I was being a nuisance. Later, I have to go to the counselor and talk to her about my problem I did and why I was in trouble, and she wasn't the only one in the counselor's office. The principal was there too. But she wasn't there to listen to a little 6th grader talk about how she got a referral for drawing on herself. The counselor begins to get angry and frustrated that I had done something wrong at my first year at this school. Again, I don't know what I've done wrong, all I did was draw, and the principal is beginning to be on my side, seeing one of her staff members and another one in the other room get mad at the 6th grader for doing something they like to do, which is draw. Later, the counselor is done with her rampage and gives me a sheet of paper that I have to go to my parents to sign. I don't know which parent I should get to sign, because if I give it to my mom, she'd probably freak out. And if I tell her the story, I drew a muffin on my hand, she's probably not going to believe me, because who gets in trouble for drawing a muffin? She might think it's something even worse that I'm trying to cover up with this little white lie I'm trying to mimic. But no. Then, what if I give it to my dad? I don't know if he's going to laugh it off, brush it off, get mad at me for some reason. I don't know. He's a wild card. And so later that day, I had basketball practice. I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't see any of the balls flying everywhere. I was just thinking on this piece of paper. My grandpa picks me up from basketball practice, and I decide to spill the beans. He was the first person I told about my incident that day. Hey, I got a referral today. Have you ever gotten one? Oh, yes, 17 at least in high school. And then he kept rambling on about how he did some things that made sense for getting a referral, and then when he asked what I did, he laughed. We laughed the entire car ride home. I get home, I go upstairs, and my dad's there. I bring the sheet over to him, and I ask him to sign it. He asks me what happened, and I tell him the story. It was in science. I drew a muffin on my hand. That's all. Are you serious? Yes, I'm serious. Show me proof. I put my hand down on the table, and there's my evidence. Evidence in nice Sharpie ink. He signs the paper, and the next day I go to school. I hand the paper into my teacher, and she doesn't talk to me for the rest of the year. She glares at me and doesn't like anything I generally do. But the thing was, though she was a 6th grade teacher, she was also an art teacher. Which makes me wonder, why would an art teacher get mad at someone for doing art? Thank you.
I love that your referral did not hinder your love of comic books and drawing. So hooray for that. I too got in trouble in 6th grade for writing, but it was for passing notes. That's what you did back in the day. You couldn't text somebody. You had to write down on a piece of paper and try to slip it to the student at the desk next to you, and sometimes the teacher would intercept that. I got in trouble for that. Okay, the judges are writing away.
Did they ever read the notes aloud, or is that a myth in TV shows?
Yeah, I'm going to say that's a Hollywood fabrication, at least in my experience. I never had anybody do that, so.
I heard a story once, I think it was probably on a TV show,
Mhm.
where someone would write a note on a specific piece of paper, and they had an identical one that talked about how much they loved the class. So when the teacher asked for the note, they could just give them the
Oh, why didn't I think of that in 6th grade? I could have saved myself a lot of trouble. Okay, so Sylvia, who's giving us all that advice, is our next storyteller. She is a freshman who loves telling stories, particularly through singing, dancing, and acting, and she likes meeting new people. Remember that.
Unfortunately, my story is not about passing notes. It's sort of about rules. From a young age, we're taught these societal rules. A lot of them are how to be normal. But we're also taught rules like look both ways before crossing the street. Don't talk to strangers. Don't get in the big white van even if the guy inside offers you candy. But sometimes we have to break these rules, to have adventure, to meet new people, to have new experiences. And that happened to me. It was a hot day. I was on Foster, which is a busy street, going to a little pot of food carts that serves Latin American food. And it's mostly outside. There's a little portion that's inside. I was in there with a friend waiting for a smoothie. And I see this little girl walk by. I love little kids. There's something about children that's just exciting. I love the way they view the world. I love meeting them. And I smile, wave, and she walks by. A few minutes later, she walks by again, and I smile, and she walks towards me. She tries to climb up on the bench that I'm sitting on, but it's too tall for her. She's maybe kindergarten age, but she's not in school, so I'm guessing 4. She climbs up on the bench, and she sits there. And I sit there. And then she looks at me and says, I'll count, you hide. 1, 2, 3. I go, I'm sorry, I can't play hide and go seek. And so she sighs and says, okay, you count, I'll hide. I go, I'm really sorry, I'm with my class, I can't play hide and go seek. I gotta go get my burrito. And so I go get my burrito and she follows me. And I sit down with my class. And my friends are a little confused. They ask if I know her, what's her name. I say, that's a really good question. What's your name? She says, Angela. I say, hi, Angela, I'm Sylvia. She says, hi. And goes back to fiddling with something on the ground. And my teacher comes over and asks where her parents are. I say, I have no idea. I say, Angela, where are your parents? And she points in the general direction of the food carts. So my friends try and talk to her, ask her a couple questions, but she won't talk to them. She just climbs on my lap. This is a little strange. Usually it takes longer to win a little kid's trust, but there's something exciting about her. And so now she's playing a game where if she pushes on my shoulders and I lay flat on the ground, and then I sit up, and then I lay flat, and then I sit up, and well, this only goes on for so long because I don't do sit-ups very often. But after a while, she looks at me and says, we need to put the rocks in the water. I go, okay. And she leads me over to this little Tupperware full of gravel and water. She puts one in, I put one in, she puts one in, I put one in. And I'm starting to think, where are her parents? I mean, if I had wandered off as a little kid, I would have gotten in serious trouble. And I'm a stranger. I mean, I'm not a dangerous stranger, but I'm still a stranger. And I don't see any people who look like parents. I mean, I see an elderly couple, but no one with a stroller, no one who seems worried. And eventually, it's time for me to leave. So I say goodbye to Angela. I go off with my class. I've driven past the Mercado a couple times now, and I always look for Angela. I've never seen her. But, I mean, she made my day. She took the trouble to come talk to a new person, to assume trust in me rather than making me earn it. And because of that, I had an amazing experience, and I hope she did too. But I think that's a lesson we all need to learn, and that she really taught me that sometimes if we take the trouble to go talk to someone, to meet someone new, we have amazing experiences even if we are breaking these societal norms. I just hope she didn't get in any trouble with her parents. Thank you.
Thank you for that. My two children could tell you that I will talk to anybody, and they know now not to ask anymore. Like, do you know who that person is in the grocery store line? Like, no, I just like talking to people. So I think Angela taught you a really lovely lesson. Okay, I keep having to tap dance with this new system of scoring. So what should we talk about now? My panel up here. Books. What's our favorite book that we read recently? Allegedly, so a book that we read recently that several people sitting up here highly recommend is a book called Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. Wonderful thriller. And Entertainment Weekly had an email that came out today that said the 15 YA thrillers that you need to read, and that was not on the list. We're going to have to email them and rectify that. Okay, I think I've done enough tap dancing. We're ready to go. We are on here, I love this SAT word, our penultimate storyteller. Do you know what that means?
Oh yeah.
Second to last. That's a big word I don't understand.
Now you know what it means. It's the second to last, the penultimate. And that would be Jamie Fields, a returning storyteller from last year. She's a junior now, and she said this year that she has 3 feet of hair and too many books.
All right, so as many of you know, I'm part of the JMP, or the Japanese Magnet Program. Now this means that I've been learning Japanese for about 12 years now. So last summer I decided to test how well I actually knew Japanese by joining the SSI, or the Sapporo Summer Institute, which meant that I'd be spending a month by myself in Japan with no chaperones. I mean, I had my friends, but nobody else. And it was there that I got into some of the worst trouble I've ever been in. I was out having fun with friends, and I noticed it was getting late, and I'm like, okay, I'll just take the bus back home to my host family. I'd done it the day before, should be no problem. So the bus stop was right next to this huge structure called the TV tower. You really couldn't miss it. So I walked up to the TV tower. The bus stop wasn't there. I'm like, okay, it's just on the other side. I walked around, nope. Walked around 3 more times, still nope. So I decided to go into the guide center right next to the TV tower. And I'm like, do you know where this bus stop is? And Lee's like, no, here's a map. Okay. So I started wandering around with my map, just telling myself, ganbatte, ganbatte, persevere. Because I'd been wandering about for about an hour now, and I really didn't want to get into trouble with my host family. Finally, I was like, okay, it's time to ask for help again. So I stopped at a convenience store. And I was like, すみません、このバス停はどこですか? And they didn't know where the bus stop was either. So there I was, this frustrated little foreign girl, and sort of having a really frustrated conversation with the people working there, and this Australian man walks in. If I could do an Australian accent, I would, but I can't, so we're moving on. He asks, in his accent that I can't do, he asks, do you need any help? I can translate something into Japanese for you if you want. I'm like, no, I got the Japanese. I just don't know where the bus stop is. He didn't know either. So we stood there having this 3-way conversation for 10 minutes in Japanese and English and getting nowhere. Eventually, I thanked them for their help and kept walking. So I kept walking, ganbatte, ganbatte, and finally, I found a bus stop. It wasn't the exact one I'd taken yesterday, but I knew it would get me where I needed to go. And so right as I walked up, the bus was pulling away. But then it stopped at a red light, and I'm like, okay. In America, you'd run screaming after it, but this was Japan. I had to be polite, so I just waved and hoped somebody would notice and tell the bus driver. And right as somebody reached out to tap his shoulder, the light turned blue and the bus drove off. I checked the schedule. The next bus wasn't coming for another hour because it was so late at night. So I wandered around and I found a Daiso, which is basically like Japanese Dollar Tree, but like loads better. And I used their Wi-Fi to text my host family. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry, I'll be home 3 hours later than I said I'd be. And they're like, no, we'll come pick you up. And I'm like, I don't want to ask for help, that's embarrassing. But they insisted, and they came out and got me. And they even brought me Starbucks, which is like $3 more more expensive in Japan than it is here, so they spent $8 on a green tea frappuccino for me. I was so embarrassed. But finally I got home. I didn't really get lost again in Japan. And this experience taught me a good lesson, that no matter how much trouble you're in, if you just ganbatte, persevere, you can make it through. Thank you.
I want to know what Sylvia's saying.
She thinks the bus stop is running away.
Oh, that's true.
Around the corner, it's like, oh no.
That would seem like something in Totoro that would happen.
Yeah, I was thinking Howl's Moving Castle. How it just like stands up and walks away.
I couldn't find it. It wasn't there.
She told us earlier that she had taken a picture of where she had been the day before, and you looked back at the picture and it
Yeah, because I
still
was
wasn't there.
standing at the bus stop and I took a picture and I'm like, okay, if I use where the sun is and the angle, I can figure out where I was. But
Something
Yeah.
happened in the future where that bus stop disappeared.
Could there
Or
be
in the
more than
past
one
and it
Twin
never
Tower?
existed.
Could there have been more than one what?
there definitely was not.
Oh.
It's a very big and famous structure based off the Tokyo Tower.
Hmm.
All
All right, are we ready? It seems like we are. Now we're at the ultimate storyteller. Sarah.
like that title.
That like works in two ways though. That's good.
That's true. Sarah's a junior who enjoys snow days. I would too, Sarah, except when we're trying to host a story slam, right? And she's almost constantly wishing that she had a hot drink with her. What type of hot drink? Tea. Hot chocolate. Okay. So let's welcome up Sarah.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on.
Gets immensely lowered. So, I am always late. It's genetically coded within me. I was 19 days late to my own birth. The night before the first day of finals this first semester, though, I knew I had to break the pattern. This semester has brought me lower grades and higher stress than I've ever had before, and I had to ace these finals. So at 10 a.m., I get in bed and I think to myself, you will get up early tomorrow. And I think that to myself for 2.5 hours. I wake in the morning with my alarm clock and my mother yelling at me, and I have 10 minutes to get ready before I have to go to the bus stop. 2 minutes for brushing my teeth and 2 minutes to get ready. I am on time. And I take a deep breath to collect myself, and in that magical way that time seems to move around me, 7 minutes elapse. Before I can ask for a ride, my mother has the keys in her hand and the door unlocked, and we book it. I get to the bus stop only to find the yellow back of the bus in the distance, and we just have to follow it. So along we go to 21st until we get to right before Broadway. There is a red light and the bus stops. And I look at it and my mom goes, "Go!" So I get out of the car and I run, but the light turns green and that bus goes off. My sister, by the way, is on that bus. She does this thing where she wakes up like half an hour earlier than me, and Sarah, you should really do that because it's good for your stress levels. No, I need my sleep. So we're driving after the bus, and I'm trying to call my sister, but she isn't answering. Finally, we get to the overpass before the bridge that goes on that has the entrance to the highway of Highway 84. I have to get on the bus before it goes on the highway. My mother cannot drive me. She needs to get to work. And the best solution afterwards would be me going to the Max stop and being an hour late to my first final. To my immense luck, there is a red light right before that bridge. There are 5 cars in between me and that bus, and I run. But do you see these tiny stumpy legs? They are not meant for walking, far much less running. I have a 30-pound backpack. Doctors have told me that's not safe. Oh, still, I try and make it. But halfway there's a red light, and it turns green. And I'm ruined. These finals were supposed to be my redemption. Miraculously, the cars aren't moving. And I turned around to go back to the car in defeat, but I realized that this is somehow where there is always construction, so somehow out of my sight there has to be a construction worker that's holding a stop sign directing traffic. Stop! I yell at the traffic construction worker. I have no idea if he heard me, but I do make it to the bus, and I rap on the door because I am not polite. The bus driver was not expecting a tiny child to be there, but he looks at me and I look at him. He knows me. This is not our first rodeo. Without a word, that kind man opens the door, and I get into the bus and I scream, "The latest I have ever been!" I might have stricken a pose and gone, "Woo!" I expected full celebration for my victory, streamers from the roof, a full standing ovation, but all I get is a... I make it to my finals. The moral of this story is you can pull yourself out of trouble, and all teenagers will congratulate you for is 3 measly claps.
Did you do well on your finals?
No!
It wasn't worth the trouble.
But I did get an A in that class, though.
Woo!
Japanese?
Ah, very good. I thought it was pretty telling when I have to say thank you so much to all of these storytellers. As usual, I didn't know if we were going to be able to pull off this program this year, so I really thank each and every one of you for being a part of this. But what was funny is I was constantly shuffling notes around, updating the students about, oh, we're going to meet at this time, and now it's changed here. And when I tried to hunt Sarah down to give her note, she was running late to math class. She got there right when the bell rang and gave a high five. Thank you.
No one needed to know that.
I think you kind of just told on yourself with that whole story. Anyway, so while we're waiting for our tabulations, I just thought I would read something from Neil Gaiman. So speaking of books, I think for a lot of students here, yes, applause for Neil Gaiman, wonderful storyteller. But he had this to say about stories, and so this is what I wanted to end with because this is why I love storytelling so much. And so he's referring to The Moth, which if you've never listened to that radio program, it's a really lovely thing to listen to each week. So he said, the strange thing about moth stories is that none of the tricks we use to make ourselves loved or respected by others work in the ways you would imagine they ought to. The tales of how clever we were, how wise, how we won, those stories mostly fail. The practiced jokes and witty one-liners all crash and burn up on a Moth stage. Honesty matters. Vulnerability matters. Being open about who you were at a moment in time when you were in a difficult or an impossible place matters more than anything. Having a place the story starts and a place it's going, that's important. Telling your story as honestly as you can and leaving out the things you don't need, that's vital. The Moth connects us as humans, or perhaps because we are, as humans, already an assemblage of stories. And the gulf that exists between us as people is that when we look at each other, we might see faces, skin color, gender, race, or attitudes, but we can't see the stories. And once we hear each other's stories, we realize that the things we see as dividing us are all too often illusions, falsehoods, that the walls between us are, in truth, no thicker than scenery. The Moth teaches us not to judge by appearances, it teaches us to listen, and it reminds us to empathize. So that's what I love about storytelling, and I'm so grateful that each of you were vulnerable and honest with us tonight. So thank you for that. So, one little plug for next week. Our winner from tonight's Story Slam is going to represent Grant in the first annual Interscholastic Story Slam.
This is a great time to get second place.
Very funny. So several high school librarians wanted to, they had started Poetry Slam this way, and that's how we ended up with Verselandia. And because several of us had started doing story slams in our high school libraries, they decided, what if we do an interscholastic high school story slam? So that's what we're trying this year. And our winner will be competing there next Thursday, March 1st, Franklin High School's newly renovated library. Okay, so I'm going to have all of the storytellers come up so we can applaud your efforts.
Okay.
Did we do it? Did we do it? We did.
Okay. Oh, photo op.
5 more seconds for that ball.
Too late. You're just making me feel shorter than I am. Okay, why do I stand like this?
I don't know.
Turn in all directions.
Are we all going to do this next year?
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Okay, so our first set of prizes go to Jordan, Danny, Sylvia, and Elaine. Thank you. Okay, and our runner-up this year is Jamie Fields. Which means, Sarah, do not be late next Thursday night, March 1st, 7 p.m. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your patience as we were working with this new scoring system with a rubric, and I really thank you for coming out in this weather. I don't know about y'all, but as a native Floridian, I am nervous to get back out on the roads and get home. So safe journeys to everyone heading back to Northeast Portland tonight. Thank you so much.